is a presentation of the iRacing eSports Network.
To the front bumper, and he hits him again now. Rayon Fowler into the outside wall.
He's going to pass nearly 3 cars down that front straightaway, and he's going to get them all done with. What amazing.
Race lead to the inside goes Logan Cloudman is going to touch in. Pit press sideways. What a save.
Look to the outside as Truncate goes off. De Jong into second place.
Going for the switchback. Oh, pinpoint driving.
It's howling down to the inside.
Trying this contact though.
Slide left to the racetrack. Chris Venner drives it back down underneath, and he takes that second spot right back. Joker goes to Garrett Lowe.
Garrett Lowe should take victory with all that contact. He's going to try and make the move around the outside the parabolica. That's not going to work, but he's going to try and get the cut back here. Get the run out the parabolica. That's beautifully done there. Michael Schubert, there's a little bit of door banging as well.
Welcome, one and all, to the iRacing eSports Network. This Saturday, the 10th of November, 2018. This is a really good show we've got coming up for you right now. This is the 10th annual World Cup of iRacing, presented by ourselves, SimSpeed TV. Of course, just one more stage of a very grueling competition. This is road match number 2. My name is Reese Gardner. Joining me in the commentary box, Bo Albert. Bo, Lotus 79 at Brands Hatch, and it's Finland versus Japan.
Yeah, and what a contest it's going to be, a race, because these cars are phenomenal around here. We're watching qualifying at the moment where the drivers get 4 laps each to tackle this car around this very tough circuit with all these elevating corners, all the different complexities of the corners, which some have different apexes, some, have completely different corner speeds as well. it's a fantastic combination, and the drivers we're seeing at the top of the timesheets at the moment, well, they're really having to earn their money, and at the moment it's Joni Heikkinen at the top, 0.6 of a second clear of his fellow Finn teammate, but the competition is still going to get closer and closer as qualifying comes to an end.
Yes, indeed. We've got 7 drivers from Finland and 8 drivers representing Japan. So in terms of numbers, Japan is definitely in favor, and Japan soundly beat the rest of Europe in the previous road match. So it'll be interesting to see what they can do versus the Finns here. Currently on pole position, as you said, Bo, it's Joni Heikkinen. The highest placed Japanese driver is Naoya Nagai, who currently occupies 4th place. Now, the format for tonight is a very interesting one. It's very short and sweet. We got 2 15-minute races, at least 2. The first one is going to be 15 minutes, and then we're going to reverse whatever the result is for the grid for the second heat, and then go for another 15 minutes. And, of course, the highest placed team at the end of that wins.
Yes, that's going to be a really tough format, and especially that second race is going to throw up quite a few curveballs because, of course, these drivers don't often see each other. They're not often racing against one another because, of course, Joni Heikkinen, a background in Rallycross. You've got JJ Nylander, a background in GT3 cars, and also the Japanese drivers, which is probably one of the more underrated communities in iRacing. It doesn't quite get represented in the series that it perhaps should for how skilled the drivers are over in Japan, but it's going to be very interesting to see how the defense goes in that second race because, of course, only the top 10 drivers in the race will score points for their nation or their country that they're representing. So they've got to make sure that they're defending pretty well. And around this circuit, they can manage that. But every point will matter because, of course, Finland have been very successful in the last few years in this series, but they're not unbeatable.
No, certainly not. And as you said, those Japanese drivers certainly a bit overlooked, I have to say. I've raced against plenty of Japanese guys, particularly in the skippies, and they have been soundly very pacey, very fast bunch, the Japanese. So it'll be interesting to see what they can do here. Of course, the racing, as you said, Bo, there's going to be a lot of defensive driving going on. Not many overtaking opportunities. The only real overtaking opportunities are into the Druid's hairpin. That's turn 2. And then we've got turn 4, which is leads you onto the long section of the Grand Prix circuit. But around that back section, got plenty of fast corners that this car can really take advantage of. The Lotus 79, of course, the first car to make full use of ground effects in Formula One back in the late 1970s. It's basically a giant downforce-producing wing.
It's pretty incredible, isn't it? Just how much grip these cars produce in the mid-corner and the speeds they're carrying into fast sections like Paddock Hill Bend, such as Hawthorne Bend as well. And we're currently on board at the moment with Joni Bachmann. And you can just see that heading almost onto the back section now. So normally the Indy circuit would go right here. We're going to stay onto the left here and make our way onto the back section. And like you said, this is a terrifying part of the circuit going through Hawthorne, heading into Westfield as well. It is just such a quick section of corners. And if you get it even slightly wrong, it could have big consequences because these cars, of course, open wheel, they will damage easily, but you can bet every little dollar you have, these drivers will fight it out to the very last second for their countries.
Yeah, they certainly will. Of course, very sensitive floors on the Lotus 79, so they really need to be careful, particularly of their curb usage. And those cars need to be as low to the ground as possible. Joni Bachmann bringing it into the pits. It's a very interesting pit entry here at Brands Hatch, which is relevant to this race, particularly because every driver has to go into the pits at least once.
Yeah, absolutely. So every driver does need to make one pit stop. The slight curveball has to be said is that they actually don't require service. So they are allowed to just sort of stop in their box and drive away straight away as well. But you made up a very good point of the pit entry because it's extremely tight and the Brands Hatch layout has almost a chicane in the entrance as well. So there's every chance that if the drivers haven't quite prepared their pit entries how they would have liked, that they could end their race there as well, because so many times we've seen drivers fight their battles on the track but lose it in the pits. But qualifying is coming to a wrap right about now, and it looks like we've got our results on screen now, Reese.
Yeah, we certainly do. So Joni Heikkinen is on pole for the first race of the night with JJ Nylander and Tapani Linaloto completing the top 3, and all Finland top 4 completed by Tommi Mikael Unhola. Naoya Nagai in 5th, top Japanese driver with Joni Beckman in 6th, Jano Sipola in 7th, 8th, Yuna Karima, Kota Miwa in 9th, and the 10 is rounded out by Shogo Nishiguchi.
Bringing it in, P number 11 will be Ryo Fujisaki, and joining them on the 6th row of the grid will be Suji Aratani. Hironori Kobayashi will be starting things from 13th, with Takahiro Ishiwaka in 14th, and Shinji Kito rounding out the 15 cars we will have on the grid for this start as they all plummet their way into Paddock Hill Bend for the first lap.
Yes, indeed. It's going to be a particularly risky one, Paddock Hill Bend. It's really hard to sight your turn in, and you basically got to follow the undulations on the track to pick out where to turn in. And that exit is also one that can really set the car really unsettled. You've got that curb on the exit and a very narrow strip of tarmac that separates you from the gravel trap. So you've got to be careful not to bottom out over that curb.
Yeah, absolutely, and we'll see so many drivers will do that, just fighting for position a little bit too much, or even just getting a wheel into the dirt, which of course will dirty the tire up, and breaking into druids is going to become all the more difficult, especially on this first lap, because these cars, when they have cold tires, they've really got cold tires as the revs rise.
They certainly do, so we'll see as the green flag flies. Big wheel spin from all drivers as we set off in the World Cup of iRacing. Joni Heikkinen for Finland, major lead coming into turn 1. They're going side by side in the background. Oh, goodness me, that is the big choke point right there. It's the 95 that's got that.
So Shogo Nishiguchi, so a little bit of contact there, and on cold tires, you can see how much the cars are squirming around right now as two of the Finland drivers go side by side fighting it out. But this is the interesting point on this first lap race, is they don't need to necessarily fight against one another because they're all working for the same team points. But what they've done now is Nishiguchi, who of course had that moment on the first lap, now looking for an attack into Hawthorne.
Yes, indeed, and this is a turn that you can really attack in on exit. As you can see, Nishiguchi just having a quick look at Jano Sipola. That's a big pack there in front of him, so all of that aero unsettling is really going to induce some understeer in Nishiguchi's car.
Yeah, well, you can't afford to get too close to the car in front of you. In these cars, of course, the ground effect does help that. Doesn't quite work in the same way as, of course, the front wings in today's cars do. But we do have Shuji Aratani, who's dropped down the order just a little bit as well. So a bit of a moment there for him as well. As Buckman are already in the pit, so there's no rules on how early you can come into the pit. So he's coming in early, getting himself clean air, and that's not a bad ploy race.
No, certainly not. Getting himself right out of all of that carnage. And it will definitely benefit him later on as we look at 5th and 6th. That's Naoya Nagai and Yuna Karima. These guys battling quite hard, and you can see Nagai catching up to Unhola. So these guys, this is where the slipstream is going to come into effect down this straight coming up to Hawthorne, and you really push so hard coming into this turn. But it just seems that none of these guys are able to make a huge gain on each other at the moment.
No, not at all. I think they're all just playing it a little bit safe because these cars, of course, I raced this back when the Major Series ran it. And, of course, this car was just horrific on cold tires. It takes quite a few laps to warm up, about 3-4 laps. So, and that was at the Silverstone circuit. At Brands Hatch, it might be closer to about 4-5 laps for this driver. So just sort of feeling their way around the circuit now. They do have 12 laps to play with, or 15 minutes, whatever it comes down to. In this race, so plenty of time just to get the car warmed up a little bit more, but the driver's still definitely trying to make out where they can find gains on the cars in front as we look at Naoya Nagai at the moment trying to hunt down the car in front, and does close up a little bit into Druids and just not able to make the ground up like you said, Reese.
Yes, indeed. But going through Graham Hill Bend, this is one of those turns that can make or break your lap. That bit of AstroTurf on the exit, easy to get an off track and unsettle your car. Very late turn in for this left-hander. Nagai really strong on entry, but losing out on exits. So Unhola just gets the little bit of the gap that he needs down the straight here. And Nagai has to stay behind for another lap, deal with that aero push once again through this very fast top section of the GP circuit. Oh, almost getting into the grass.
Yeah, they're not afraid to play with track limits, are they, at the moment? I just love watching. These drivers are so good. Just how close they're getting to the grass and braking zones around this circuit is incredible to watch. As all of a sudden, eighth and ninth, is just beginning to turn on the pressure a little bit as Aratani is coming under pressure from Sipola, who is getting ultra close heading into the final corner. And if you can set up a run here, you have every chance of making something happen in the paddock hill bend, but he's going to dive into the pits.
Yeah, and just as well, because Shuji Aratani actually messed up the last turn somewhat, took a bit too much curb on the inside, and that made him lose his run. He almost got into the grass on the outside. It's hard to pick your turn in this car, just because it's one of those machines, as Aratani going wide in Druids, it's one of those machines that if you want to go faster through a turn, you need to just trust in the car. The faster you go, the faster you go, amazingly enough.
It's a pretty weird concept, and for so many drivers, it's such a hard thing to get used to, because you just think that, well, I can't go faster through that corner, because if I do, the car's not going to stick. So you just think, oh, whatever. If this just practice, you think, whatever, I'll just try and see what happens. And you make it. The car has the grip, and it works out with the downforce that it does end up getting through the corner. And some drivers can get into that mindset. I, for one, definitely cannot. But Reese, of course, you drive prototypes. How long does it take to get into that mindset of trusting the car's aero?
It takes quite a long time, honestly. As we're riding on board with Unholy, you can see how much he can push around a circuit like this. Really, I'd say it took me about 2 or 3 years of driving prototypes on and off to really get used to the fact that you need to push so hard. You need to trust that the car is going to grip, because the moment you lose that trust, the moment you back off, that's when the grip goes. It's difficult to wrap your head around, but with enough time and dedication, you can do it. And these Finnish drivers, a lot of them really like those high downforce cars, so I'm sure that they definitely have a nice advantage, at least from their perspective, as we look at 4th and 5th.
Yeah, getting a little bit closer now as Nhola just still leading the driver from Nagai through the Hawthorne section, now firing into Westfield, and I love this corner right out to the AstroTurf. Nagai even using a bit of gravel as well, just to carry more speed. You can see just in this high-speed section is just losing time constantly and just not able to carry the speed that he needs, as they're still fighting their way all the way out to the exit curb as well. But for our race leaders, they have checked out well and truly. Joni Heikkinen, of course, finished second in the Rallycross World Championship Series just a couple of weeks to go, and out to a very strong lead ahead of JJ Nylander, who is only leading his teammate Lina Luoto by a couple of seconds as well. So the two Finnish drivers very close. But this battle between 4th and 5th, of course, still raging on pretty well as they head into Druids.
Yes, indeed. And Yuna Karima getting into the pits. Remember, they don't have to take service. It's just in and out of the pits for these guys. Meanwhile, Sipola, he has been stopped for quite some time. So he's actually gotten some really big damage. Not sure what's gone on there. We're looking at a replay of him right now. See what's gone on. So he's going nice and easy. Oh! Goodness me, that was huge.
Massive damage to the Lotus there, and it's not a surprise that he's still in the pits now, as 4th and 5th is well and truly on side by side, and look at the moment there! A massive moment in the grass for Nagai, lucky to hold onto the car, but he is not backing down for even a second right now, straight back onto the throttle and attacking once more, so he is not giving up for a moment as Nhola continues to have the blowtorch applied to the back of his car, and you'd have to think eventually one of these two drivers would want to get away from one another, but they're going to continue for yet another lap.
Yeah, indeed they are. These guys really getting into it at the moment. You could see what happened to Sipola there. That is a typical Lotus 79 or prototype high downforce open wheeler thing. The moment you get even a tiny bit of grass or hit a bump the wrong way, the car just goes. And especially at those lower speeds, it's really difficult to recover. Let's see how they take this turn this time. Very late apex from both of them, staying off the curb, very nice, and it seems like they've gotten through there nice and cleanly for now, but Nagai, you can see really pushing it at the moment. He wants this position bad.
Yeah, he's not going to let it go lying down, is he? He's still pushing, and the speed he's carrying into the corners constantly right out to the grass when turning into the corner, which is such a terrifying thing to do because, of course, this is a typical racing circuit in the European sort of British layout because it's just grass, it's just gravel, it's just tyre walls. There's no runoff. If you make a mistake here, as we saw with the driver of Zippala, you're going to have an issue as JJ Nylander is the first of our top 3 runners to make their way into the pits. So Team Finland got themselves out to a nice little lead initially. Now just beginning to play the strategy card as actually more cars have taken the pit stop than they haven't at the moment. Only 4 cars, which is the top 4, have not pitted yet. So almost we'll get the entire cleansed order of the running order once everyone's taken their mandatory stop. And it is Team Finland really dominating at the moment as Nagai continues to slide his Lotus around.
Yeah, something that the Lotus can definitely do with those big fat rear tires. A lot of slip angle on those things they can take. He is pushing very hard right now. So up the front, Joni Heikkinen, he's making his way across the top of the circuit. We'll see if he comes in this lap. Remember, I can leave it as late as possible to get themselves into the pits. Have a look at how much Heikkinen is pushing. That's ridiculous. He's got maximum pace out there at the front. Now, does he go for the pits? No, not this time. So he's going for another lap. Tapani Linaloto, meanwhile, he stays out as well. How about Unhola? He's going to stay out as well, but Nagai going for it.
Yep, and I think that's a good call there, of course. Currently the leading Japanese driver, I do believe, in this race, so he's got everything to play for. He's got everything to gain on the Finnish drivers because, of course, only the top 10 score points, so it's not just a case of scoring points where you can. It's about maximizing your points. You can see how little he was in the pits there. I've got it registered as 0.2 of a second, losing nothing in the pits, and you can see they're just coming ahead of Joni Backman, who has the highest speed through Paddock Hill Bend, but shouldn't be able to do anything into Druids unless he's feeling very brave. The closing rate is so big. They're getting within millimeters of each other through Druids. This is millimeter stuff, but that shows just being a little bit better in the pits. I said this at the beginning of the broadcast. You can gain or lose a lot of time on track, but you can always gain even more in the pits, and that's exactly what Nagai did. Finds himself a position for Team Japan, and with the other top 3 still yet to pit on this lap around at least, well, he still has more to gain.
He certainly does, and he also has the advantage of there being clear air in front of him. Backman will be suffering aero disturbance. He won't be able to make up as much ground through these high-speed corners as he would have been able to. And just pointing out, thanks to director Jay Kennedy, the drivers do have to pit before the end of the last lap, so the clock is ticking. They're going to have to pit pretty soon.
Yeah, Nunhola is in this time around, so we've got one of our Finnish drivers in, still 2 to go, so we'll see how the other 2 go, and we'll see where he rejoins here, because this could be potentially pretty close as Nunhola comes out of the pits. You can see in the background Nagai just lurking, and of course he's going to have the better speed this time around through Paddock Hill Bend, but I think he might be too far back. We've seen dives into Druids before, but that is just a little bit too far back for Nagai. But we saw this in the battle before the pit stops, before race. He will not let this go.
He certainly won't, and he has got the fire in his belly now for sure, has Nagai. In a Finland sandwich right now, Unhola and Backman, but see, Unhola now has the advantage of clear air. He can use this section of the lap to try and gain a tiny bit of advantage on Nagai. Any at all is going to work for him here.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see he's just able to streak away a little bit through Hawthorne, the ultra quick right hand, now into Westfield. And you can see Nagai just pushing a little bit wider, doesn't have the grip. As second place, Lina Luoto does indeed dive into the pits this time around. So we've got another one of our drivers in, just one more to go, which is of course race leader Joni Heikkinen. And he does have to pit next time around because he can't pit on the last lap like we heard before from our director. So we'll see where he comes out, but I would imagine he'll be well ahead of Unhola, and indeed he does, but he does lose the spot to Nylander, who sweeps around the outside to take effective second place back. So no change there, but I think they are a little bit closer than they were in the pit stops, but both being from Team Finland, I expect order to stay the goes.
Yeah, Nagai, unfortunately going wide into the gravel trap at Paddock Hill, so Backman was there to pounce. Both of them getting into the grass on the exit of Druids, but that is Backman through, and Nagai is going to be back through to 6th place now. He'll be suffering a lot of pressure now from Yona Karuma.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a big mistake from Nagai, and that is valuable points for Team Japan. All of a sudden down the drain. So not what he needed as our race leader does dive into the pits. Should be no issues there, but what can Nagai do? Because look how close he was heading into the entrance of Hawthorn. You can see just from mid-corner to exit how much he was losing. He's only going to have a single lap of Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit to make a pass happen if he wants to redeem himself. And we saw one driver make a mistake. There's every reason we could see another driver, even from Team Finland, make a mistake this time around.
Yes, indeed, that's entirely possible. Joni Heikkinen starting his final lap here. As it stands, seems like Team Finland definitely have the measure of Team Japan. So Japan, I think, at the moment will be discussing amongst themselves what the best way to go about the next race will be. Remember, the field is going to be inverted, so there will still be a Finn starting on pole in the form of Sipola, but Japan is going to have the advantage. They'll be starting at the front.
Yeah, so that's going to be an interesting thing to see, and especially how the drivers work their way through the field, because of course we've seen how difficult it is to make passes in this race, but the drivers at the front of the field, including Joni Heikkinen, who's coming to the final few corners now, well, he has to do it the hard way, all the way from 15th on the grid. Next race should be an absolute firecracker.
Yeah, it certainly should, no doubt about it. Joni Heikkinen coming through the last turn to take victory for Team Finland. And from the way things are looking at the moment through the field, it looks like Finland have well and truly taken this particular race. JJ Nylander coming across the line to take second. Very strong run from him. And Tapani Linaloto completing the podium there. Meanwhile, Shuji Aratani off the circuit, he's got some issues.
Yeah, he does. Very off the pace at the moment. So we'll just quickly rewind and see what happened. And it was through the corner of Westfield. And I just made a small little error there. And unfortunately, it was just all over Red Rover.
Yeah, certainly we're currently on board with him on this replay. So he goes through into, I believe that's Hawthorn. And coming into Westfield, just a little too wide. Getting loose over the curbs, and that's a fair whack of the Armco.
Yep, and these cars, of course, take damage pretty darn easily. So, unfortunately, he'll finish outside the top 10, but will be in the front 2 rows for the next race. But that is for next time, because, of course, our race results from that one were Joni Heikkinen took the victory ahead of JJ Nylander. Tapani Linaloto would come home in 3rd place, with Unhola coming home in 4th, with Nao Nagai coming home to complete a top 5 after that disaster in the final few corners. Joni Beckman in P number 6 with Jano Sipola. Note where the results are clearly mucking around, because of course this isn't a tournament session, so the results are just mucking around on me just a little bit, but nonetheless getting ready for the race in just 2.5 minutes of a warm-up.
Yes, indeed. So Jano Sipola is starting on pole for this one. Hironori Kobayashi starting on the front row as well for Team Japan. Takahiro Ishikawa in 3rd, Shuji Aratani in 4th, Miwa starting in 5th, Kito in 6th. Drivers getting ready to start this particular one now. Sipola is going to be in a very unenviable position. A sea of Japanese racers right on his bumper as they go green. Now, who is going to beat them into turn 1? All right, it's going to be Sipola. Goodness me.
Massive moment there for some of our drivers as they make their way now to Druid's Hairpin, and we're hearing it was Takinen, so that's a massive moment there as they're finding their way on the exit of Druids, and it's just a sea of Finnish drivers at the back who are squabbling for position as side by side between a lot of our cars, including Backman and Nagai as well, so they're still fighting, and the Finnish drivers in the background still 2x2, so they're not making life too easy on themselves as well. But out front at the moment, Jano Sipola has done exactly what he needed to do, as in the background we're going to go side by side through Hawthorn as the Lotus-inspired livery car of Kito is going slow on the entrance. That's not what you need to be doing, and it's getting ultra close on turn, and somehow they all make it through so far.
Yeah, they certainly do, all side by side through. Oh, goodness me, that's not good. That's really put Naoya Nagai at a disadvantage. This is very awkward. Tapani Linaloto trying to go for the move here, and Nagai is just sliding down the field right now. Big shame for him after such a strong performance in the first race, and he has gone now almost all the way to the back. He is last, and he goes straight for the pits. I think that's a good decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's not the only one, of course, because Shinji Kito, who also had a bit of a nightmare first lap, did indeed dive into the pits as well as a lot of the drivers. Just trying to get into rhythm now, of course. They're back to cold tyres, and it is a fairly hot track, 37-degree track temp, so they will come to temperature a little quicker, but still, the drivers still having to deal with that as they make their way now, heading towards the Indy section of Circuit, and then when they turn off for the Grand Prix, and look at the Finnish drivers in the background, still fighting it side by side, as in Hola.
Shuji Aratani, he's off. Sorry, coming on to GP extension. He has lost a bunch of positions out of that one. He looks like he's in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah, he does. And side by side through Hawthorne and back, trying around the outside. That is as close as you want to get between the two, and it's not over. But somehow he's made it work on Nishiguchi. So Nishiguchi down a spot. Backman undeterred, completely on fire, and already making way through the field.
That is trust in the car right there. Backman knew that the car was...
Oh no! It looks like he's almost clicked another car as well there, and that was Nishiguchi. So after losing that spot through Hawthorne, it's all gone wrong. As a few of our drivers do dive into the pits. In fact, a lot coming into the pits. But we'll get a replay up on screen, and look at this for a pass. Absolutely fantastic. Around the outside, ducks back in line, and all of a sudden he's got to adjust to the dirty air of the car in front, because Backman's got past him. He had clean air initially. Now he doesn't. The car's understeering a little bit more than he would have liked. And coming into this left-hander right here, the car just pushed a little bit wide. Actually, it snaps mid-corner, sends him wide onto the curb, and it bottoms out and just collects another car, unfortunately, as one of the Finland cars off in the background there as well.
Yes, indeed. That's really horrible incident for Nishiguchi. Real shame. We are back live. Jano Sipilä continues to lead for Finland. Kota Miwa is in excess of 3 seconds behind at this stage, and Aratani currently in third place, but he is suffering a bit of pressure right now from Joni Heikkinen.
Yeah, he is, and Heikkinen is not a driver you would want to be behind you in your mirrors, but doing a good job at the moment as Heikkinen just dips a wheel into the grass a little bit, so Aratani is still fighting on, but look how much better the exit is as he looks to the inside, heading into the final corner, and there is nothing Aratani can do, because he has just been absolutely mugged there by Heikkinen, who flies through to take yet another position. In fact, Aratani not looking quick, because all of a sudden he loses a spot to Lina Luoto as well, who gets very close heading to paddock hill. Ben overshoots a little bit, but makes the move work as well. So Team Finland absolutely flying here at Brands Hatch.
Yes, indeed, and they are making those moves count, which is really important at Brands Hatch. It's a circuit, as we discussed in the warm-up, with not many overtaking opportunities. So if you're going to make a move, you have to make it stick.
Yeah, you do, and Finland are being the absolute masters of that at the moment as they continue to make their way through the field. And after what was a pretty poor showing on the grid, at least, because of course with the reverse grid format, they're already, well, Joni Heikkinen, who won our last race from 15th on the grid, finds himself in P3 currently, and visibly capturing the car in front of Kota Miwa and Jano Sipilä, who's eked out a little bit of a lead at the moment, 2.9 seconds ahead of his nearest competitor. But with the pace we saw of Heikkinen, I wonder just how quickly that will come down.
Yes, indeed. Heikkinen's last lap, a 1:14.299, 14.957 for Kota Miwa, and Jano Sipilä a 15.2. So it seems like all of these guys may just come together, as Sipilä does a 14.8. So I will shut up. 13-0 for Joni Heikkinen. Oh no, and just like that, he goes into the gravel trap out of Paddock Hill, pushing a bit too hard, it seems. I will point out, sorry, Bo, that P1 and P2 have just set the exact same lap time, down to the 1,000th.
Oh wow, that is incredible. So that shows just how close some of these drivers are, and this is a car that would be unfamiliar to so many, so to have that kind of lap times between two drivers competing at the front of the field with the event and the nerves behind an event like the World Cup of iRacing, that is pretty impressive to say the least. But for Joni Heikkinen, a very close moment there as Kobayashi gets a very wheel spinny exit out of his pit stop as well, and it was quite a long stop as well. weighing in at nearly 16 seconds. So that is going to hurt his race quite a lot, as we saw some drivers in the last race doing pit stops, of course, with no service required, down to just 0.2 of a second.
Obviously some damage there for Kobayashi, which is easy to do, especially around a circuit like this. The bumps around Brands Hatch can wreak havoc on that front wing. Meanwhile, Ishikawa is around and at a standstill. Just going to a quick replay now, of course presented by CPR Kart Parts. What happened to Ishikawa here? Just dipping a wheel into the gravel and bam! Oh, yeah, whack.
So another very broken car there. We're getting another shot now, and you can just see over the rise, bumps a little bit on exit, and it is just gone, and there's no way of recovering as Yoni Heikkinen finds his way in position number 2 now. So he's made a move stick on Kota Miwa, so Yoni Heikkinen continues to fly. The only car at the moment in the 13-second range, bar Tapani Lenaluoto. So his pace right now is absolutely stunning. And it has to be said that I thought it would take quite a while for him to get to the back of Jarno Sepala. It very well could be at the end of next lap.
Oh! Ouch! My goodness, he is pushing so hard right now.
Oh, he's on the grass again. That is just every millimeter of track being used onto the curb as well, which we saw claim the car of Nishiguchi just earlier in this race. So he has no fear. He is pushing everything at the moment, which is, I have to question a little bit considering how dominant Finland were in the first race and how quick he was as well, that he doesn't necessarily need to go for the win here, but he is proving me wrong. He wants to dominate the World Cup of iRacing.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I think part of it may be down to the car. I think Heikkinen thinks if he backs off a little bit, then he stands more of a chance of crashing. Oh, little bit of oversteer coming into Graham Hill Bend, but you can see he's just maintaining that slide, maintaining that momentum. Fantastic stuff there from Joni Heikkinen as he chases down his teammate and countryman.
And the top 5 are still yet to pin this race, so there's still strategy in play, so Heikkinen doesn't necessarily need to make this pass happen on track. He can afford just to do it in the pit stops. But just look how quickly he is closing. I said at the end of next lap, and my guess might just be about spot on because he is flying, heading into the final few corners. Only 3 to go, but look at the speed right out to the grass as well, which could so easily end in disaster if the car just grips up in the wrong way onto the curb as well, which we saw claim Nishiguchi's car early in the race. So he is just completely pushing through the final corner, carrying so much speed. This pass could be done into Paddock Hill Bend, and indeed the countryman just backs off, and the driver Joni Heikkinen from 15th on the grid will lead the end at lap number 7.
He could make it 2 from 2 here, could Joni Heikkinen. Fantastic stuff, and it's so spectacular watching the drivers wheel these cars around this classic circuit. You know, Brands Hatch hosting Formula One races throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So this car, no stranger to a track like this, and it's fantastic to see just how hard these drivers are pushing. We're currently looking over Joni Heikkinen's shoulder as he works the wheel around this circuit. Inch perfect line there through Hawthorne. Fantastic stuff.
Yeah, he's really got the car and the track mastered as well, and he's doing everything he needs to secure his second victory, and was riding the rev limiter quite a lot through that corner just there, but nonetheless extracting the pace out of it. So I'm not going to tell him if that's wrong or right, because clearly it is working for him at the moment, as I still yet to take his pits, but the top 5 still yet to pit, so none of them chose to pit last time around, and Heikkinen will continue for another lap, and why not? If you've got clean air, you might as well use it.
That's exactly right. No more relevant than in this car. All that downforce. As we look at 6th, 7th, and 8th. Tapani Linaloto, JJ Nylander. It seems like this is the closest battle we have at the moment, and Naoya Nagai has a front row seat for this particular bit of action.
Yeah, absolutely. And for Team Finland, you know, it's really about risk versus reward. They're all here for a fun race. They all want to do the best they can. But if they take each other out, that is valuable points for the entire team lost, and could be the moment that Japan needs in this race. They can't afford to get too racy with one another, as Lena Luoto just gets onto the grass a little bit on the AstroTurf there, and risking his car once again. But they're all just staying away from each other at the moment. So that's good to see for Team Finland if that's who you're supporting here today. And be sure to let us know which country you are supporting down in the YouTube chat. And we should get a nice little rivalry going on because it is an event that we don't often see on iRacing where it's all country versus country. Often it's team versus team or driver versus driver. It's an entirely new concept, which is fantastic in its 10th year.
Yes. Oh, no! Oh, look out! Oh, Joni Beckman. Huge incident across the top. And JJ, goodness me, came so close to getting into him.
Yeah, that was a little bit too close for comfort there. And like I said, it can all be over in a single moment as we get a replay at the moment on board with JJ Nylander, which will be quite the moment, I have to think, as we're just having a look now. And this is going to be one terrifying moment, Reese.
Whoa, just Beckman going across the grass and so close between those two. That was easily an incident that could have turned into something much worse. We take a look at Heikkinen once again as he makes his way around the track.
Yep, absolutely. So he's still continuing to launch the car. Look at the way it's bouncing through there.
Wow.
That is a pogo stick of cars at the moment. It's just bouncing constantly. So clearly it's not got the most comfortable dampers, and I hope he has a pretty comfortable seat because his back will be pretty sore and might not be able to compete in the NASCAR race, which we'll be following this in the NASCAR trucks at Michigan Speedway. So that's what we still have to look forward to here tonight. But there are still 2 laps to go in this race, and Heikkinen still has to pit. In fact, the entire top 5 still has to pit. So we know they're going to be in at the end of this lap if the drivers who are a little bit lower don't pit this time around, which Kota Miwa will indeed come around and pit. So he's the only one, I believe. Oh no, we also have Shunji Aratani coming to the pits as well. But still 3 cars to pit at the very last chance.
Yes, indeed. And I think they've done all they can so far. And that's going to be their fate sealed with those pit stops. Just touching briefly on Heikkinen once again. As I ride on board with him, looking over his shoulder, I notice he barely moves the wheel at all. Like, that is the definition of minimal steering input. It's almost straight through a lot of these turns. Just goes to show how precise Heikkinen is being. He's driving it almost like an enormous go-kart.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, these cars, I believe when setting them up, they do have a pretty small amount of caster as well. So that could be a little bit as to why there is so much small input in the corners as well. And he will indeed come into the pits this time around. Also, a quick note from our friend at Racebot, and of course, commentator for Viet Scops, Mr. Jake Sperry, that Finland actually got to choose this road car. So out of all the road cars they could have picked for this event in the World Cup of iRacing, they chose this car. So it's no wonder why they're so successful in this combination.
Yeah, certainly. It's I guess, quite a popular option among the Finnish community. Meanwhile, it is close for the lead. Heikkinen just coming out of the pits in front of Tapani Linarotto, and it's almost looking like there could be a move on. Heikkinen just diving straight to the inside of Druids, possible defensive drive. We'll see if he can try and gap Linarotto in these last couple of laps.
That would be pretty amazing if there was anything that would happen between these two on the very last lap now. Lap number 12, on 12, and I would hate to see anything happen between these two, but stranger things have happened as we're currently looking at, I believe, a Finnish top 5 lockout at the moment. So great result from there as was just seeing if there's any more battles happening through the field. And Kota Miwa is going to go side by side heading to Hawthorne with Nao Nagai, but loses the spot considerably. No straight line speed in Kota Miwa's car, so just not got the pace to continue in that fight. So a position swap on the last lap. But Reese, it doesn't look like Joni Heikkinen's going to have any more position swaps this time around.
No, certainly not. He's coming down through the last couple of turns. He has been the class of the field in this particular event. Out of the final turn up here at Brands Hatch, he takes the win. And with that result, Team Finland, I think, have definitely sealed the road section of this round of the World Cup of iRacing.
An absolutely fantastic display from Team Finland, and it was indeed a top 5 lockout in the end. So that just shows how dominant they were and how effective they managed to get this Lotus 79, which is not the easiest car in the world to run around a circuit like Brands Hatch Grand Prix of all things. But they made it happen, and a great result there as they will convincingly take out the round number 2 of the World Cup of iRacing.
Yes, indeed. Results on screen for that last race. Joni Heikkinen taking victory from last place on the grid. Tapani Linaloto in second, with JJ Nylander completing the podium. A top 5 lockout from Team Finland completed by Jano Sipola and Joni Backman. Naoya Nagai in 6th, the top place Japanese driver. Kota Miwa in 7th. 8th, Tommy Mikael Unhola. 9th, Yuna Karima. And the top 10 rounded out by Shinji Kito.
Shuji Aratani will bring things home in position number 11 with Hironori Kobayashi in 12th. Ryo Fujizaki will come home in 13th with Takahiro Ishikawa in 14th. And of course, Shogo Nishiguchi of having that incident on the very first lap. So 2 retirements in the end for Team Japan. Not the way they would have wanted to start this event race, but they still, of course, do have the NASCAR race coming up for redemption.
Indeed, they do. The oval race is coming up. It is the modern version of Michigan International Speedway in the NASCAR Truck Series. Silverado and Tundra. Always like me some truck racing, and at a high-speed circuit like Michigan, it's certainly going to be a cracker. They could be facing up against UK and Ireland, so it's certainly going to be an interesting matchup. Japan versus the British Isles. Stay with us for that one, but we're going to be wrapping up this particular one. The oval race coming up soon in about an hour's time here on the iRacing Esports Network. So keep it in your calendar. Keep it in your notifications. This night is only just beginning. From SimSpeed TV, it's bye for now, but we'll be back.
The following is a presentation of the iRacing Esports Network.